November of this upcoming season will feature two key returns to Boston. We're going to break it down on today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Wednesday, July 24th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. As summer sports rage on, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long at FanDuel.com. Today on the podcast, we're continuing our look at the Bruins schedule month by month. Yesterday, we looked at the month of October and how it will be vastly different from last season's first month, where the Bruins had a fairly easy schedule. They're going to be hard-pressed to repeat that this season because of some of the changes they've experienced, as well as specifically the loss of Linus Ullmark and a much more difficult schedule. What does November have in hold? We'll discuss that coming up. First, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. Now, last November, the Boston Bruins played 13 games. They had a record of 7-4-2 for a .615 point percentage, 16 points. That put them 13th in the NHL. Their point percentage ranked them 12th. So, a decent month. Didn't really blow the opposition away, but it was, of course, boosted by the fact they had gotten off to such a great start. In October, they amassed 17 points, going 8-0-1 over their first 9 games. That schedule featured games against the Toronto Maple Leafs, where they won 3-2 in a shootout. They lost their first regulation game of the season to the Detroit Red Wings on November 4th. Rattled off a couple more wins after that, a 3-2 win over the Dallas Stars, a 5-2 win over the New York Islanders. From there, they went on to lose 3-2 in overtime to the Montreal Canadiens, if you can believe it, with Caden Gooley scoring the overtime winner in that one. They rattled off a couple wins in a row from that point on, 5-2 over the Buffalo Sabres, 5-2 over the Montreal Canadiens, avenging the previous week's overtime loss. They had a couple tough games in Florida, the first of which they lost in overtime to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Of course, this was during that stretch where they were really struggling to close games out. Steven Stamkos tied the game with 5 seconds left in that one, and then Brandon Hagel scored the overtime winner. They rebounded from that nicely, though, to beat the Florida Panthers by a score of 3-1 2 days later, which continued their trend of playing pretty well against Florida during the regular season, at least, and into the playoffs, pushing them to Game 6. That game featured a game winner from John Beecher and Jake DeBrusk from Matt Poitras to help secure that win. They then played a back-to-back on the weekend with a 5-2 loss to the Detroit Red Wings on the Friday night. It was Boston's second regulation loss of the season, and both of those, again, came at the hands of the Detroit Red Wings up to that point. The next night, they lost their third regulation game of the season, getting beaten 7-4 by the New York Rangers. Chris Kreider had 2 goals and an assist against the Bruins in that one. And I believe in that one, the Rangers overtook the Bruins atop the NHL standings. So up to that point, the Bruins had been first in the NHL thanks to that stellar start. But that loss to Detroit, a loss to New York, bumped them out of first place to the New York Rangers. Their troubles continued from there for another game at least, as they lost 5-2 to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Not the Bruins' finest moment by any stretch of the imagination that night. Jeremy Swayman made 17 saves on 19 shots before being replaced by Linus Ullmark, who made 18 saves. So a rare pull in that one, as the Blue Jackets' Russian players really stepped up. Dmitry Yoronkov, Ivan Provorov, Igor Chinnikov, and Kirill Marchenko, as the Bruins were beaten 5-2 by the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, they got a bit of a softie to end the month as they played the San Jose Sharks on Black Friday, November 30th. Jeremy Swayman made 26 saves as the Bruins ended a 3-game skid with a 3-0 win against the Sharks, a shutout for Swayman as the Bruins swept the season series against the Sharks. Heinen, DeBrusk, and Zacha doing the damage for the Boston Bruins in that one. So overall, again, the Bruins in November of 2023, they went, I believe, 7-4-2. And, while they weren't able to keep up the magic they produced in the month of October, still a pretty decent season. And up to that point in the year, they remained one of the better teams in the NHL. Through 22 games, they had 33 points, one back of Vegas, and tied with the New York Rangers. Will they be able to replicate that success in November of 2024? We're going to take a look at that schedule and highlight some key games here as the podcast continues. All right, hockey and basketball are way in the rearview mirror, but baseball is still going strong. WNBA is exciting to watch. The Olympics are right around the corner, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to keep the sports going whenever you want at FanDuel.com. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. You can look ahead to some hockey futures. You can put some money down on baseball every day. Just head over to FanDuel, start making the most of your summer, and get those daily boosts or bonus. Don't forget, FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you so much again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. And speaking of YouTube, be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today, all the latest news, opinions, and analysis from across the Locked On universe, free and available 24/7 on YouTube and the Amazon Fire TV channels app. So looking ahead to November 2024, here's what is in store for the Boston Bruins. It's, again, looking at October, it's going to be a difficult start to the season, to be sure, much more difficult than last season. November proves to be perhaps maybe an emotional one, and we'll get to that here in a minute. The month will start with a matinee game against the Philadelphia Flyers. Discussed yesterday how they could be a bit better this season. They're introducing Russian phenom Matei Michkov this morning. He will certainly give their offense a boost. Maybe some questions in net still with Carter Hart off the roster. But Philadelphia should be a team that will push for some playoff games as they did last season for a good chunk of the regular season. After that, they have a big 4-game week on tap with 3 home games and 1 road game. It's a back-to-back situation on November 2nd and 3rd. They'll host visit the Flyers on the 2nd and then come home to host the Kraken on Sunday, November 3rd. And that's a team I mistakenly yesterday said Brandon Montour went to Utah. He, of course, went to Seattle. And they're a team that will be looking to be much improved. Of course, Matty Beniers always comes in and seems to play great in Boston, provided he's signed. He's still a restricted free agent, as is our boy Jeremy Swayman. Now, after that Seattle game, they will travel for a Tuesday evening tilt in Toronto against the Maple Leafs. Always hotly contested, of course, and that should be a banger. Then they come back home on Thursday, November 7th to host the Calgary Flames. They will probably not be very good this season, but of course it will be a game in which Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov played their former mates, or some of them anyways, for the first time as Boston Bruins. Both of those players had been traded by the Flames last season to the Vancouver Canucks. That's a game we'll touch on later on, but there will still be some emotion, of course, as there are some Flames still on the roster with whom Lindholm and Zadorov played. Now, Saturday, November 9th is one that you will want to watch for sure. That will mark the return of Linus Ullmark to Boston for the first time since the trade to the Ottawa Senators. The Bruins will be hosting the Senators. It's a game that up here in Canada will be featured on Hockey Night in Canada. Linus Ullmark, of course, was brilliant during his time with the Boston Bruins. We cannot say enough about how much he will be missed, both on and off the ice. And, we saw those of you on Instagram, there was a pic the other day of the Senators had sent Ullmark's kids some jerseys that he was donning. He's already been in Canada's capital, touring the city, touring the rink, and it's going to be tough to see him in another uniform. Of course, he appeared in 130 regular season games for the Bruins with a brilliant record of 88, 26, and 10, and a .924 save percentage. His relationship with Jeremy Swayman was incredibly special, and this will be the first time that they will go head-to-head, and certainly will be an emotional game at both sides of the ice. Now, certainly, we need Jeremy Swayman to sign before that can happen. Maybe the Bruins will have a bit of the book on Linus Ullmark, and we'll figure out how to beat him. The Senators, as I said last week in the power rankings, I don't expect them to be a playoff team this upcoming season. I still think they have a bunch of holes on their roster. They do have a lot of high-end young talent. Brady Tkachuk, who's actually on Locked On Ottawa Senators today, if you're interested in that. Tim Stützle, Drake Batherson. They've got a veteran in Claude Giroux. Ullmark is a big piece that they were missing, which is kind of hard to say, seeing as though Joonas Korpisalo is now a member of the Boston Bruins, and he was pretty bad last year. I would not expect Korpisalo versus Ullmark in that one. Bessie makes an appearance on the podcast, wags her tail in my face. But, that would certainly be a game to keep an eye on. Now, after that one, the Bruins will go on the road and start a 3-game stretch against Western Conference opponents. They will be in St. Louis on November 12th to visit the Blues. Then they will travel to Dallas to take on the Stars on November 14th. I don't know, for whatever reason, games in Dallas always seem to pop, and always interesting to watch Brad Marchand go up against his old mate in Tyler Seguin. And then on November 16th, the Bruins will come home to host the Blues on November 16th, a matinee game, 1 p.m. start. So that will be interesting for sure to see the Bruins. Yeah, there's always that history there with the Blues. A lot of players from that squad have moved on. And Torrey Krug, unfortunately, will not be playing in that one as he is facing an injury that could keep him out for the entire regular season. And we'll see if that happens, their cap implications, LTIR, could the Blues look to make a move here before the end of the regular season? Of course, Jordan Pennington is still there, and he always seems to get under everybody's skin whenever he steps on the ice. So that's kind of a look at the first half of November. There's another big reunion game on the schedule, and we'll discuss that here as the podcast continues. What does the back half of November 2024 look like for the Boston Bruins? So following the stretch of 3 games against Western Conference teams in the Blues and the Stars, they'll come home to host the Columbus Blue Jackets. They just announced Dean Evason as their new head coach. They will be one of those teams that's looking to prove that they're on the come up. They do have some good young talent on the roster. I mentioned the Russian players earlier in the podcast, Ken Johnson. They still have a huge goaltending issue. Maybe Jet Greaves is the answer, but Columbus should be a beatable team for the Bruins this season. You always look at, if you rank a team higher or lower, teams you expect to beat, Columbus is one of those teams that you expect to beat. Following that, the Bruins will welcome Utah Hockey Club to Boston for the first time. They will have already played Utah Hockey Club in Salt Lake City in October, and here they will round out the season series by welcoming this team on the 21st. Now, as we move towards the end of November, the Bruins will host the Detroit Red Wings on the 23rd. They will visit the Detroit Red Wings on the 23rd, a team that, as we talked about, handed them their first 2 regulation losses of the season last year. And then the big one to circle is November 26th. It's a Tuesday evening game, 7 p.m. start, and the Bruins will host the Vancouver Canucks. And there's a lot of crossover here in this one. I mentioned Lindholm, Zadorov playing against the Flames. They will be playing for the first time against the Vancouver Canucks, a team that they both played for a bit of a time last season after being traded to Vancouver. Both players, it appears as though, entertained the possibility of returning to the Canucks. Ultimately, it didn't work out. There was a quote the other day from Zadorov saying maybe Vancouver was his first choice. But as he explored the open market, it became clear that Boston was where he wanted to go. On the flip side, of course, we will be getting the returns of the likes of Derek Forbort, who signed with Vancouver in the offseason, Danton Heinen, who had a very nice year for the Bruins in his second tour of duty in Boston, and of course the biggie being Jake DeBrusk. It will be his first game back as a member of the Vancouver Canucks against the team that drafted him. Again, I'm pretty disappointed that he is not still a member of the Boston Bruins. The Bruins still have a big hole on the wing that he could have filled. Their biggest need right now is a right winger on the line with Brad Marchand and Charlie Coyle. He would have filled that perfectly. They instead decided to invest that money into Zadorov. You could argue that maybe they didn't need to do that. Go with Lindholm and re-sign DeBrusk. I don't know what emotions will come up for people. There has been a rehashing of the trade request in the days since he signed. Maybe some people will boo, but for me, I've always been a huge Jake DeBrusk fan and loved the way that his game developed over his time with the Boston Bruins. Inconsistent offensively, yes. Didn't put up the scoring numbers that we would have hoped, but he developed into a very strong two-way player, and he should be a valuable piece for the Vancouver Canucks. So that's going to be quite a night seeing Zadorov, Lindholm going up against DeBrusk, Heinen, Forbort, and both groups going up against former teammates. Now, after that emotional affair, the Bruins will have no time to rest. They'll be in Brooklyn to take on on Long Island, I should say, to take on the Islanders on Wednesday, November 27th. And then in lieu of the usual matinee Black Friday game, the Bruins are going to be playing at 6 p.m. Eastern. They will host the Pittsburgh Penguins in that one. Kevin Hayes will be playing for the Penguins now. That's always a bit emotional as he honors his late brother Jimmy in his appearances in Boston. So that should be a good one. Always great to see Crosby go up against Brad Marchand. They, of course, will be teammates later on in the season during the Four Nations face-off. And that's something that we will touch on when we get to the February portion of the regular season. That's it for November. The Bruins, 61.5% point percentage last season. Can they replicate or top that? Decent chance, as long as they are off to a good start and can get everybody up to speed in the lineup. We'll touch on what the December schedule looks like on tomorrow's episode and bring you all the latest on the black and gold here on Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I hope you're all having a great week. Please do take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and please do subscribe if you have not already to get daily episodes of Locked On Bruins on YouTube and in your podcast feeds.